Good evening. This is the Historic Preservation Commission meeting, and it's Wednesday, November 2nd, and that's 2022, and it's 6 o'clock. We are here to call to order, if we can, roll call.
Chairman Bruce Trimber.
Present.
Vice Chairman Jesse Solomon.
Present.
Commissioner Mary Boxbell. Commissioner Carrie Schmelter.
Present.
Commissioner Evan Goodwin.
Present.
Commissioner Josh Simpson. Commissioner Carletha Frazier.
Present.
We have a quorum, correct? Okay, just always checking. And is there any person that needs to recuse themselves for any purposes with today's meetings? Just checking something I'm going to add a little different. No? Okay, thank you. The Historic Preservation Commission will not hear new items after 9:30 p.m. unless authorized by a majority vote of the commission members present. Items which have not been heard before 9:30 p.m. may continue to the next regular meeting or special meeting date as determined by the commission members. Note regarding public comments. Every member of the public who is recognized to speak shall address the chairman and in speaking avoid disrespect to commission, staff, and other members of the meeting. State your name and address when speaking for the record. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. And it looks like we have an adoption of the agenda as written.
I'll make a motion for adoption of the.
I'll second it.
Thank you. All in favor or any discussion? Excuse me. No discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Looks like it passed unanimously. Looks like we have the adoption of 2 different meeting minutes since we had a meeting and then a special meeting. So the first adoption of minutes would be for October 5th of 2022. I hope everyone's read through them, and I'm looking for an adoption of those minutes. Can I get a motion?
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any discussions? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
And minutes are passed as written. Thank you for writing those so nicely. And we have a second meeting, a special meeting that was on October 17th, 2022. I'm also looking for a motion to adopt those minutes.
I motion we adopt the minutes from October 17th.
Let's see, everyone, you were in that meeting?
Yes, sir.
So you weren't at the first meeting though, so.
Correct.
Yeah, so that's still good, so her vote was negated. So the second one, we have a motion, I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Have a second, any discussion? You weren't there, so.
I actually wasn't at the last one either, so I shouldn't have seconded that.
That's right,
Yeah.
yeah, so we have a problem. He wasn't at the meeting.
I think.
Well, he was at the beginning of the meeting, weren't you?
No, I missed all of last month because I recused myself from pretty much everything on it.
So technically, there's only 3 people of the 4
Yeah.
here, if that makes, of that one meeting.
So there's it's fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. So therefore, looking for a vote on that, adoption of the meeting. We did have a second, so adoption of the meeting minutes of October 17th. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Looks like that passed. Do we have any public comments? None? No one addressed it. Looks like we have 3 items on our agenda, plus a couple of information on adoption of, my goodness, meeting dates for 2023. That's crazy. Anyway, looks like Katie, you're on for all of these, I believe, aren't you?
Surprise!
We have you, Katie.
It's me. Okay. The first item that we have tonight is 6 Shell Rake. It is old business. So, you were all in attendance at the September, whatever the first Wednesday of September was, 7th, meeting, and so I will run through this fairly quickly. However, I have all of the pictures in the slides so we can go back to look at things as need be a little bit closer. So this is a certificate of permanence to allow the construction of a new 2.5-story single-family residential structure of approximately 4,866 square feet with an attached carriage house of 1,135 square feet to be located at 6 Shellrake, which is lot 31 in the Tabby Rose development that is in the neighborhood general HD zoning district. This is the site plan which has been proposed. As you can see, the main structure is here facing Shellrake with barnacle cut to the top of the screen, and mud bar lane is where the driveway takes access on the bottom of the screen here. This is the proposed house with a future building that is not remotely part of this application, but will be built on that lot by someone else sometime in the future. These are the original first floor plans as well as the revised first floor plans. And
You have the original and the revised,
yes,
is that correct?
so I got the original here and the revised here. I took a
Is there
couple.
any clouding on this revised plan?
No, however, the floor plans for all of them have changed very minimally. The things that you'll notice, there are a few things on exterior walls that have been modified, but the main takeaways from the first floor is that the pocket doors have been added and removed internally, so you will not see them on the outside. And a few floor layouts, the pantry and the study, those areas have changed just a bit. So you can see here, this was changed from a real door to a pocket door. Pocket doors are
It's just
still real doors,
internal,
but
it's not.
it's all
external.
internal.
It's all internal, it's nothing external, is that correct?
with the exception of the locations in which windows have been modified on the external portion of the structure. The second story is about the same, so there's a little bit of a layout change here. However, it is primarily the same on the internal here. The original attic versus the proposed attic, or the
Can you show us
revised.
that again, please?
Yeah, you're going kind of fast.
Sorry,
Yeah, so
I'll slow down.
This is the original, let's just,
This is what was proposed initially
yes,
and what has been revised. I do crop these out of plans, and so they are not exactly, you can see that it moves on the
It's fine.
screen. That's because of where I pasted it, not because they've done anything too drastic to change, like lines and things like that. It's probably something I've done. And then the original roof plan and revised roof plan, I did highlight on here where the roof pitches have changed a bit, so you can see them on here. The rear section here went from 1 1/4 and 12 to 1 1/8 and 12. The main mass of the structure, which are these two highlights here, went from 5 1/2 to 6 1/2 and 12, and then the front porch here went from 2 1/2 to 2 and 12. So there's a little bit of a roof slope there, and you'll be able to see that a little bit better on the elevations. So this is the front elevations original and the revised. So you can
Ken,
see,
it's hard for,
I know,
and I'm
However,
trying to,
When it just changed just from 2 to 2.5 to, it just,
nothing to do this way.
yeah, you're not
so
gonna
if
notice.
you watch like a flip book real quick, here's your change.
Okay,
Okay,
yeah.
so the original, the ridge line of the house here is at 34 10 inches, and it's been brought down to 33 1. So you can see that's where that roof slope that I highlighted on the previous slide has taken place there. I think I missed this one here.
No, the one, is that the back?
It is probably the same as that. No, so it was 6 1/2 and 12, and it's been dropped to 5 1/2 and 12. So that's the other location here.
Okay,
Okay. The rear elevation and the revised rear elevation. So again, flip book style here. Mostly what you're seeing is my shift in the page here because my dimensions aren't perfect, and then the additional supplemental, because you can't see through buildings, so they've provided the additional. And here's the revised, the original left, and revised left. So again, you can see that roof line drop. And then the supplemental for the right elevation on both. Here are the sections of details and the revised sections of details. And I'm gonna skip through the sections and details fairly quickly because I did highlight all of those in the staff report. Here's the original window submittal.
And how many were there?
There were,
There was, okay, I see, okay.
and here's the revised. So you can see this one here went away, and I believe this bottom left corner went away. So this is now the 6-3. So
So they
These
basically
two-
eliminated 3 windows? Four.
this one and this one went away,
As well as the trans.
and then the transom went away as well.
Okay.
And then the doors, and the revised doors. Here's the original breakdown of that square footage, and the revised, they are the same.
The square footage is the exact same.
Yes,
And I know that was a major point of discussion with the whole body last time. So the square footage from the previous to this one is the same. And
Correct.
the exterior is the same, so,
so here are the reduction exhibits that show exactly what has been modified to the elevations. They pulled it down for you here, so you can see it a little bit clearer than when I set them on 2 different slides.
okay.
So this is the front elevation,
But that's really all that's been changed, and the exterior is just the roof pitch.
And the windows on the side.
and the window.
Okay.
Nothing with the square
There's
footage.
some very.
Nothing with the square footage. I know that, again, going back to the major discussion that we had was the massing and the square footage.
Right.
So that nothing there, what I understand, is being changed whatsoever.
The square footage has remained the same. This is the rear elevation. The left side elevation, so this is the side that is internal to Tabby Roads. See, the service yard here is brought down just a bit, and the roof line reduced here, here, and then all along here, as well as the height of the chimney. And then the right elevation, which this is the elevation that would be towards Bruin Road. There is still that street and additional lot, so it's not fronting
Okay.
Bruin. So that's where the transom windows have gone away, and this has been changed to a trellis, as you can see on the elevation here. So this is a pressure-treated wood trellis instead of those panels that were changing material on the flat plane. This is a streetscape aerial view that they provided for us so that you can see a little bit better how this is going to fit on the lot compared to the houses that are currently existing.
Could we see that one more time, please?
Yes. And then this is a streetscape of the side elevation there. This is the landscape plan. I noted there was no change on the landscape plan, so this is the same one we were looking at previously.
Okay, and they're meeting the requirement.
And the canopy coverage data, which also hasn't changed, just so that it is the
Okay.
same. The HGC considers the 8 review criteria, which are set forth in section 318.3 of our Unified Development Ordinance when assessing an application for a certificate of appropriateness. They have the authorization to approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. Town staff requests that you take the following into consideration as you determine how to take action on this application. The first is that the primary structure exceeds the maximum footprint because the carriage house is an attached carriage house and the square footage is in the
Let
height in between. This is the same comment that we had at the conceptual.
let me ask the commission here, do we want to discuss as we go through these items, or do we want all the items discussed and then go back?
I'm okay to go through all of them and then discuss.
Yeah, I agree.
I think that way.
Okay, let's do that.
The second item is that it needs to be repositioned to be parallel to the front of the lot. This is one that we've discussed some, and this Tabby Rose development is the lot, the development that has some less than perpendicular lot lines. So this is why the streetscape was specifically provided here, to show how those lots will be facing with the corner here and then the future building. The future building on that other document, which I can pull up in just a minute. The next one is that the number of windows and pane proportion variation must be reduced to provide a better proportional relationship to one another. In that original staff report, I have the percentages that are pulled from the traditional construction patterns book, as well as the number of windows. Typically, we see between 4 and 5 different types of windows, and they are still exceeding that
So
number.
we're still exceeding.
That is an arbitrary number. The pane proportions is a percentage that is laid out in the traditional construction patterns, which is the supplement text to the UDO as indicating section 515. So that's where that number is coming from. 4 to 5 is an arbitrary number. That is because that is an average of what we typically see. So it may be that this is an appropriate number. It's just that that is something that we have noted, and they did reduce it by 2, but it is still exceeding that percentage.
And how many are we at now?
10,
10, okay.
we were reduced by 4.
And we're over by how many? I'm sorry.
We were over by approximately 5, if we're at 10, 4 to 5.
That's just reading your.
Yeah, that's just a number to kind of keep in mind. Okay, thank
I
you.
don't think there were necessarily 14 to begin with, but that's what I was trying to, but I'm just.
We'll ask for your comments after we go through this, please.
And then the next one was the determination on the use of boral as a substitute material. This is something that we've discussed. It is that fly ash material that is a recycled material, I guess is the best way to phrase it. It's a byproduct material. And that is the number 5 as well for the railings and balustrades. The door table must be updated to include the type and finish of the proposed exterior doors. They did list it on some of the elevations, but the door table still calls out that they're to be picked by the GC or owner. A determination on the appropriateness of the mass and scale of the structure, since that was part of what the commission asked for on the previous application, it's still been included, and then the tree removal permit is required. So those are the items that are outstanding on the items that were from the original staff report in September. I have detailed them a little further in the staff reports that you all have in your packet, and in which, if you're watching online, is available on the Town of Bluffton website through the Agenda Center. So those are the items that I have. This is that same drawing that I had in the original PowerPoint showing where the external break in the thing is, and then the internal break of the square footage here. So that was where that was brought into play. The applicant is here to speak on behalf of the project. I'm happy to answer any questions that I can answer based on the code. And
So they're over only on heated square footage?
the footprint of the primary is under on the square footage that is permitted for a maximum. However, the maximums are based on the ability to hold the site because it is a form-based code. So the square footage for the footprint is for the Unified Development Ordinance. They are still meeting the heated square footage requirements for the Tabby Roads HARB and development plan.
But there's no definitive separation between this and that. So that's where it gets a little.
Just overall footprint is too big, but the heated
So the way that our ordinance reads for the building size, we do the maximum footprint, not including porches, is what is maxed out. For the Tabby Roads development plan, they have a total heated square footage, and if the total heated footprint, I'm sorry, and if the carriage house has heated space in the first floor, it counts. If it doesn't, then it doesn't count at all towards the heated square footage for the footprints in Tabby Roads, because that is how the development plan took place in the early 2000s. So they are in compliance with the Tabby Roads HARB, which can be more restrictive but not in conflict with our ordinance. Our ordinance has a maximum footprint, not including porches, which does not differentiate between heated and unheated space, only enclosed and unenclosed space. So it is the enclosed space footprint for the primary structure, which staff has found is in excess of the allowable maximum for this zoning district.
And over by how much?
120.
It is in that staff report, which I can pull up real quick.
Is it 181 or
It
something
was
like that?
180 or 120 or some number.
Pull it up for you. 181 square feet.
That doesn't include porches.
Correct.
So the square footage is the exact same that it was when it came before.
Correct.
And we had that discussion by this body before about that being concerned.
Yes.
And I know that there was some motions made, but then that motion didn't pass, so that negates all those motions. So the major discussion was regards to the massing and the square footage. So nothing has been changed there, to date.
Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, please.
Okay. Thank you.
Pardon me. So just as a little bit of background, at the September 7th meeting, there were two motions made. I believe both of them were made by Commissioner Simpson. Both of them failed on a vote of, I want to say 3-4. And the two motions were largely consistent with most of staff's recommendations. The real questions were about the massing and the scale, and the square footage. So condition number 1, and then what I believe is listed as condition number 9, now is included in the staff report to kind of get you back to where the discussion ended up in September, at the September 7th meeting. There are square footage, maximum square footage requirement, or maximum square footage allowed for a carriage house, and there's maximum square footage for a center hall building type, which is what the main structure proposed here is. Is that right?
It's an additional building type, but, or no, I'm sorry, it is a center hall, I'm so sorry.
So in this particular case, because it'd be very simple to figure out the calculations if this was a detached carriage house, but because it is an attached carriage house, the question is, where does that line occur? Where is that dividing line? The applicant says that it is largely arbitrary and can be located as the applicant sees fit, whereas staff says it needs to be in conformity with when you're looking at the facade. And I'm butchering probably both of their arguments here, but that's the way I remember it. So the question again is, if you take into account, a certain portion of the first floor of the center hall building and have that square footage allocated to the carriage house, then both of them fall within the permissible square footage requirements. If, however, you rely on the staff's interpretation, whereas you look at the natural dividing line between the two buildings, or the two structures, then there's 181 extra square feet on the center hall building type.
So this is just arbitrarily drawn, however it makes it suitable for whatever, I mean, I'm just saying.
I think that the question is whether the UDO would allow for the line to be drawn so as to, essentially whatever is needed to get in that square footage requirement, or whether staff's interpretation of the UDO, that you look at the building, you see from an architectural standpoint, where it looks like there are two different buildings, and you applied the square footage requirements for those two. And I think that's where the commission was a little bit divided, but ultimately that's why you're here. And I know that the applicant is here as well, so I'll turn this off.
Thank you.
Okay, if they change the connector from closed in, just like at the garage entry, if they just made that not walled, would then that count as porch?
If it was, I forgot I don't have a microphone, I just need one more. If it was unenclosed space entirely, that would be the case, yes.
But if it's covered,
If it is covered, it
Condition.
is still, it could still be a porch. If it is enclosed, it is not a porch.
so they could essentially take that garage entry and make it just a covered porch, and just, that would change a bunch of square footage. Possibly?
How many square feet is that bottom porch is the question, I guess. Is that bottom porch
It's
180 square
9 by-
feet?
This is porch here.
That whole thing is porch.
Right, no, I'm talking just if you go right there,
This is,
if you just took the bathroom straight across and that corner out and just made that covered porch and not close the wall, and how many square, I don't have a dimension on that, it's 15 feet. I'm just trying to find an easy, make it a porch and not enclosed, and then it would meet all requirements.
If it were a porch and not enclosed, it would no longer be enclosed space, and I can't speak to the exact number of square footage in that L-shaped space.
I believe that was a possible recommendation that was discussed previously.
11, I don't have a dimension for it.
There was a discussion, anyone else? I believe that was a discussion that was made previous submittal. Okay.
That looks to be
Does anyone, before we bring the applicant up, does anyone else have a discussion point?
Then the windows was reduced by how many? 4?
They were reduced by, well, they had been listed, but I don't think they were all used. What I understood, I just heard, but the
But it's still
schedule
over.
now is over by maybe 5.
So the applicant has removed the horizontal transom window, the 5x26 double hung, and the 5x8, the 5.8 by 2.8 double hung, resulting in 10 window types, 8 different pane proportions, reduced from the 14 with 10 pane proportions that existed on the primary, or the original smell.
And how many is allowed?
It is a percentage, so it's the,
It's not an allowed number, is that what I understood you saying? It's kind of a number that,
the number specifically isn't one, it's because it was a comment that was on the initial staff report, it has still been included. This is the section of the original staff report.
110.
So the traditional construction patterns notes that a reasonable and achievable standard for the window is the maximum variation for vernacular designs is 20% in pane proportion and 12% for classical architectural design. We are very much a vernacular designed area, so closer to that 20% is where that pane proportion should be falling.
so with that being said, what are we looking at? Interpreting it to percentage and number.
I included in my thing. I can do some math for you real quick, but it's gonna take me a second, so if you'd like to open it up to the applicant, definitely have that be the case.
And for the windows, really the intent is that you don't have some windows that are looking more square and some looking more vertical. I think based on the application and on the window schedules, they're gonna be keeping in around the same proportion, keeping a vertical proportion for the most part, so.
Good.
I agree with that.
Anyone else want to have a discussion before we bring the applicant up for, does the applicant want to come step forward?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, hello. State your name, please, and.
William Court with Court Accents Group,
Hello.
on behalf of the cooks, who were here 2 months ago for the meeting, but could not be here today. Most of the work that we've done in this submittal has focused on scale and mass. In our conversations with Katie, that was our understanding that was where we left off. My recollection of the meeting in September was that there certainly were 2 motions made by Mr. Simpson. We ultimately, it was tabled, but from the conversation taking place in those motions and my questions directly to the board, it seemed like after extensive conversation, item 1, which was predominantly about whether or not we were interpreting our square footage correctly, I think we landed on it is not entirely clear, so that would fall to you guys. But that there was some conversation on the board that it seemed that the mass was more concerned than the square footage. We did have an extensive conversation that had this been done in 2 phases, that we could get to this square footage pretty easily by doing phase construction, so that therefore maybe it would not be a concern. it is the strong preference of the applicant, owners, that the square footage be allowed. I think that our interpretation is not arbitrary. I think that it is more about the actual programmatic use and how I think we've attempted to take great care to make the hyphen look like a connector in between two elements to further break that scale down. But I know that was a big part of our conversation, so I don't want to prolong the meeting anymore on that front. Of the remaining 9 items, I know in most of the conversation that took place last time, it seemed like we were fine on the parallel nature of the property, but we did provide a supplemental document showing more context around the property for why that made sense. But it seemed to have been kind of taken off the table pretty quickly in the last meeting. We did talk at length about windows. It seemed like that the proportions were pleasing with the exception of the transom windows, which were a big concern. We have removed those transom windows and tried to get a few others more in alignment. The use of boral was obviously discussed quite a bit. We left that alone. It seemed like it was not going to be a problem, but we could certainly revert to what I think would be a more maintenance requirement, but a more acceptable KDAT if we had to. On the doors, I know we did note that these would be wood-clad doors on all the elevations. We did miss in the schedule. It still says, I think, to be determined. But the intent is wood-clad on those doors, and I'm happy to have that as part of any consideration here. That is the owner's intent. The transoms were, I believe, taken care of. The 2 different materials on one surface. I know there was a lot of discussion in that meeting about whether that might be acceptable. We've gone ahead and removed it just because we didn't want it to be a concern. And I think that item 10 about the tree removal was obviously more of a paperwork thing. So it's really 9 that I thought we had been tasked by the board to focus on the massing and to try to bring some of the height down in the building. To that degree, we provided some supplemental, the colored documents, but maybe more importantly, we did talk to the chairman of HARB. We requested some drawings of property right across the street to try to create some street context.
Who do you talk with?
Rob, the chairman of the review board at Tabby Roads.
Okay.
So turns out his home is directly across from it. He is one of the larger lots like this one. We can just get to that.
Sorry.
Sorry.
There we go.
So he is directly across the street, detached garage, similar size structure, length, width, architecturally, and then one further there with the street section, height wise. I mean, we're kind of right in line with not only that structure, but with a couple of others. We did bring the scale down a couple of feet of that roof form. We brought the connector hyphen down, and we talked with Katie about dropping down the service yard wall heights. We did meet with the town and tried to talk through some of those adjustments. I thought in that meeting it felt like we were focusing on mass, not on footprint. Once we had this conversation 2 months ago, but I'll kind of leave it at that. We have been. As a result of that meeting, whether I misunderstood or not, we were focused primarily on mass, which seemed to be a couple of the board members' primary concern.
Mr. Chairman, if I
Yes.
may just interject there for a moment.
Thank you.
Looking at my notes, I largely agree with Mr. Court's recollection that it was mass and scale, that issue. That was a primary concern. There was never a formal determination made as to square footage, but that was the direction that was given to Mr. Court.
Very good. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Other than that, we've really just, a couple of the bearings we've dropped, tried to bring down the pitch of the roofs, just tried to think about how it would be perceived visually from the street. so that as perspective takes place, that we're bringing some of that roof height down. That was our primary conversation with Katie, and when we met with her after the meeting, that and again, I think a conversation about the height of some of the service yard walls and things. So that's where we focused our time. It was certainly not to disregard others. I am trying to certainly lobby on behalf of our property owner here, who this is obviously their desire, their wish, but I thought we were, if I've disregarded something, it was with my thought is that we were to be focusing on scale only. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Happy to answer any questions.
Any discussions? How were you all feeling on this? And if we do, I'm just gonna skip number one, but I do remember talking about that product, the Boral. I think we discussed that, and I believe we considered utilizing that just because it's a new technology, it's a new product, and I understand it's quite a good sustainable type product. Anyway, I just remember discussing that we were gonna, I think we thought that was an idea appropriate. So I guess all the other things, who wants to talk about what their feeling is in regards to the square footage, the massing? Any discussion or comfort?
I think they did a great job bringing the massing down. I mean, I'm fine with everything as it is, quite honestly.
Any,
Yeah, I mean, I think the house itself looks really good on all four sides, and I think, I mean, the section that they showed with the, I guess, neighbor across the street really shows how that fits in. I think, I mean, it makes sense. This is also it's important to note in this neighborhood, it's kind of a double lot. I don't think there's a lot that's bigger, although I could be mistaken, maybe some of the Bruin Road ones. I think, I mean, for me, I'm still hung up a little bit on one. I'm fine with everything else. I can't look at an elevation as far as windows. I think that they did a really good job making every facade look a little different. But not to, I mean, so for I guess the position that you're taking is, this lot would be allowed a certain square footage of carriage house and a certain square footage of your main building.
Yeah, I think that really the big difference is kind of where we draw those lines, right?
can you bring that up, Katie, please? I think that was the,
You know, we're basically saying that on first floor, and I get it, that like, it's not very clear in UDO, in my opinion, and I know we spent a lot of time talking about it, but our position is on behalf of the applicant that the garage starts where you leave the house, and that from the perspective of the overall massing and scale of the carriage house, that we're using the end of the hyphen to basically accomplish where we set the tone for the second floor. I understand that it creates a jog effect, but it's really no different than the jog effect that is shown with the red line. There is some arbitrary nature. The reality is, and I think we talked about this with the chairman last time, you could have conceivably stopped at pink and built that main house, and it would meet every criteria. And then you could come back in and build the connector and the garage wing and ultimately make a case to fill in the second floor and still be within the allowable square footage. So I want to push back on one and say that in our opinion, we're not over square footage. It's just, we're not seeing eye to eye interpretation wise with the town. But I do think where we ended up at the end was that had you phased it, we probably could have pulled it off anyway. So to force the applicant to say, let's cut a hole in part of the garage and make it open and call it a default porch. It does nothing for scale and massing, like it makes it the same house. But it would technically meet the criteria of the guidelines. So we're in this sort of technicality phase where I could make the house look bigger and probably get the square footage down, but I don't think that's the right solution architecturally. I think the right solution is to try to work with you guys to sort of maybe find some common ground on one by bringing the scale down in a 9, and hopefully we get to a place where you guys are all comfortable.
Thank you.
And I think for me, the square footage issue is not really an issue as much as the scale of the connector itself. I get that the square footage could have been gotten to over time with a phased approach, but the nature of the connector being basically a full 2-story connector makes this feel like it's one larger house. And I don't mean that to say that it's not articulated well. It's a great design, and it speaks to the way that architecture would have been done over time, sort of filled in generationally. I just feel that the scale of the connector itself is too great in adding to the fact that the main house is a 2-story plus a full, the dormers read, especially from the front and from the corners, like perspectives, feel like essentially a 3-story house. To have a 2-story connector into the carriage house feels really large for this area for me.
So,
Just subjectively, I think that's the issue that we're getting at is this the scale issue as we were reminded on the last meeting is just strictly a subjective reading,
Yeah.
and that's just how I
What
read
is
it.
the plate height of the second floor? Right, the 9-foot ceiling?
Yeah.
So say, you might be able to read it.
So if you drop it to 8, you could drop the soffit down and lower the whole thing, and that would not read as tall?
Well, so I think that question then gets to, I think we've already dropped the plate height in the connector. You almost want some differentiation between it to make it feel like a hyphen and a connector. So we run the risk of making everything, we're at 8 foot on connector and 9 foot on the second floor, I believe. So and honestly, when we compared it to the house across the street, our plate heights are almost identical, like and so I appreciate that. I'm like, the best we're doing right now is the fact that this is because it's such a large lot, we've pulled that 2-story connector away from the street and pulled it back towards the alley, so that the reality is when you see it from the public sides, you're seeing the opposite, where the main house is really only that first, almost third to maybe not quite a half right-hand side, and then there is a deep sort of courtyard with a pierced brick wall and landscaping to soften that connector, because you're only really ever seeing it unless you're in the alley, from the opposite side.
Could you pull up, I believe you had a slide with the neighbors in the area, the neighborhood, or the...
I mean, for me, I'll just say that is that Mud Bar Lane is the alley that just serves those homes. I don't have that big of a problem, maybe if it was flipped on Barnacle Cut Lane, but that's really, it's all people's garages back there.
Barnacle is a garage street, is that correct?
No, sorry, the Mud Bar Lane is the alley.
Mud bar is the garage. That's, the mud bar is the alley?
That's the alley. So they're all rear loaded
Okay.
up top.
This would be your 2 public streets here, Barnacle and what do we call that, Shell Lake, yes. Mud Bar is that back, and that is strictly used for these 5 buildings right here.
And this actually, to your right, is your office, is that correct?
Correct.
So
So-
this is
This is all landscape and pool here and fencing and that sort of thing. So our 2-story hyphen that in between here is actually pushed back to the
alley.
mud bar, as far back as we can get it, physically to accomplish.
So that view is alley view.
Correct.
Barnacle and Shell are, in a sense,
This is our
view. If somebody's driving down, they're gonna probably go down
Yes.
Barnacle.
Correct. This is your public corner. So this is that main part of the house right here, the 2.5-story with the porches on either side, hopefully to soften that.
Could you show us the elevation on Barnacle Cut? Do you have a,
So that's, which one did you want?
Right side.
the Barnacle?
Yeah, we're seeing that.
That's what this is here.
That's that there.
Like that, there you go. That's fastest.
Okay, so yeah, so what you're seeing is the main body, a porch here, and then a low one-story porch with a fireplace, and then all courtyard fencing here. The two-story components in the background.
Is there any further discussion? Are we at a point that we could make a motion? And who desires to make a motion, considering, I think, the fact that the Borel, at least in my opinion, was all right, and the other items. But it's the,
I'm still stuck on one with the footprint exceeding. But
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
If I may, try to make a motion based off of what I've heard.
Yes.
You got the old motion from
that would be,
September.
I always appreciate that, Richardson.
So, yeah, like, just before I make the motion that I'm proposing is going based off of Commissioner Goodwin's responses and Commissioner Schmelter, Commissioner Trember, your responses at the September meeting about the square footage not being of a primary concern. And then, I believe, if I'm correct, Commissioners Frazier and Solomon both had concerns about the square footage at the original meeting. But as far as massing and scale, Commissioner Solomon did not have the objections that Commissioner Goodwin had. So what I'm going to do is put together a motion that is in favor with approving the Boral and seeing what happens. So a motion to approve the application with the following conditions. The first condition, to allow the square footage to be approved as submitted. 2, to not require the structure be repositioned to be parallel to the front of the lot per section 515.5F of the UDO. 4, to allow the use of Boral as a substitute material for those listed for columns in section 515.6H of the UDO. Per 515.5F4 of the UDO, for determination of the windows and the panes variation is proportional based off of the changes in the plans. 5, to allow the use of Boral as a substitute material for those listed in 515.6H of the UDO for the railings and balustrades. For 515.6I of the UDO, the door table to be updated to include the type and finish of the proposed exterior doors to be reviewed at staff level. 9, that the mass and scale are appropriate. And 10, per the application manual, a town of Bluffton tree removal permit be required.
Does anyone have any discussion in regards to the possibility of that motion? If that being the case, who wants to make a motion?
Can I motion that, what he just said?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, you can say I so move.
Exactly.
So
Just say I
moved.
move.
Just say so moved.
So moved.
And we need a second.
Then I need a second.
I'll second.
Do we have any further discussion?
Yeah, I would just ask that, I guess if the mass and scale are going to be considered, potentially moving the connector down and introducing dormers, keeping it at a low knee wall to try and keep that connector down. I know you've got hallways on the outside and there'll be issues with it, but just as consideration.
Commissioner Goodwin, Commissioner Goodwin, would you prefer that the mass and scale be submitted and reviewed by HPRC and at the staff level? And say we're going to approve it, but we want to make sure that staff and HPRC sign off on the mass and scale.
Yes, could I add that as an amendment?
We'll take care of that. I just want to make sure that we're.
Yes, that's great, thank you. Is everyone clear on the amendment? And everyone clear on the motion?
All right, so if we can please just do a motion to amend to add
Fine,
that.
thank you. Yeah, so therefore I have a motion to amend as stated.
Yes.
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, so the motion
now-
has been amended, is that correct? And so now I'm still have to approve the new motion, is that correct? So now I'm looking for an approval of the new motion as amended. Looking for,
We just need to vote, right, on that?
don't I have to make it a new motion? Or we just now vote on it?
Just
So I don't have to redo, okay, so now I'm just looking for a vote for the motion as amended.
yes, sir, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you for your Robert's Rules, lessons once again. So now I'm looking for a vote on this. All in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Looks like it was passed unanimously with that motion. And thank you again, Richardson, for assisting with that. Is that clear, Carrie?
That's good. You're gonna email me?
Yeah.
Great.
Excellent.
Perfect. And I will follow up with a letter, probably tomorrow.
Looks like Katie, you're on the second item.
That's me. Okay,
Something again that we had heard once before.
yes.
And
So the second application we have before us tonight is, again, old business. This is for 1301 May River Road, which is the farm. It is for the addition of a cooler structure of approximately 80 square feet to be located behind the structure. It is an accessory structure or a garden structure. So the resubmitted package, which I have included in your packet as attachment 2, has gone through the conditions that were placed on it during the October meeting. And yes, detailed in the October 5th staff report. And I have done the same where I've crossed through the ones that have been addressed with that and included the items that had not yet been addressed. I have received a letter from the ARB as of, I think, yesterday. So while it was not included in the staff report, I have received it. I do ask that you include it in the motion, that it just be incorporated so that it is cleaner for me and I can include that in as the resubmittal, if that is the motion you decide to make
the
tonight.
ARB is standing for an acronym of,
The Architectural Review Board for the Promenade.
thank you. Just wanted clarification on that.
So the revised elevations that have been proposed for you, it does enclose the structure on all 4 sides. And the recommendation is that staff recommends that the HPC approve the application with the following conditions. One is that we receive that ARB letter. We did receive it. However, please include it in your motion if you are going to make a favorable motion on this. The second is that the information on the proposed door must be provided because it just wasn't included in the information, as well as information on the soffit must be provided to ensure compliance with those standards.
Can you go back to the drawing, please?
Yes, I can. Here are the elevations, since they are multiple. And you can see behind the wall here, you can see that metal cooler structure. Here's the west elevation, which includes it here.
So now we're showing it completely enclosed
Yes,
with a roof.
yes.
Okay. Kind of dark.
And then this is the wall section that shows it. This is just where that soffit material needs to be shown, as long as it is pressure treated or it is hardy. It is an acceptable material. It just needs to be indicated on there to ensure it's not plywood or rough sawn wood.
And the proper gutter.
And the gutter is a half round. It is shown right here.
Okay?
Oops. Got my zoom tool going, guys. There you go. So there's your half round. What I've got. The applicant is here to speak on behalf of the project, and I can answer any questions that you have on.
Any discussion on this?
Well, I was just gonna ask, when you're saying include the ARB letter, or when you're saying include it in the motion, like just include staff comments?
Per staff recommendation number 1, just so that I can have the paperwork in the right order, since it was not submitted with the information that was reviewed.
So in other words, it's been submitted, we just have to say that so that if they submitted it, it's just not included in this package.
It's an administrative checkbox.
So it's just in the,
Yep.
so it's done, but we just have to say
Please.
included, so then it's done. Correct?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. So any discussion? Does the applicant want to step forward?
Sure. I think we did exactly what you asked for when we tabled it last time.
And state your name, please,
James Atkins, Court Atkins Group.
for the people that are listening.
Get the other half of this project. So we did get the ARB letter, so we submitted it on the day it was due and also gave it to the ARB, and they provided an approval without any comments. The soffit is pressure treated or hardy. And there's no door on the garden structure.
Can you click it to the second tab there?
Second tab,
Sorry.
let you do it. Break anything. So I took pictures of a couple of the recent garden structures around, as well as the existing one that's there. There's no, you can't see it anyway. If we went through that whole thing, you can't see any of this building, but the door is to the inside. So it's just an opening to get to the equipment door. If that makes sense. If you want to know what that looks like, I can show you.
So it's framed out?
Just right. Yeah.
There's.
Is there any questions for the applicant? Any further discussions? And if not, I'm looking for a motion. Would like to make a motion? We have the motion items listed. So it's just basically saying per staff, a motion to be made by just saying per staff report.
To approve with conditions as stated in the staff report.
I'll make a motion to approve per staff recommendations or with conditions as stated in the staff report.
I'm looking for a second. We have a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? It looks like that passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, Katie, it looks like you're on the third item, I believe. Now, this is new business. The other things that we had were old business. Now we're on to the new business.
The next item we have before us is our new business first item. This is a request for 41 Stock Farm Road.
We have the applicant here.
Yes. Yes, you're here about the applicant. Perfect. Yes.
Very good, I just was checking. Thank you.
This is the certificate of appropriateness to allow for the construction of a new two-story single-family residential structure of approximately 3,310 square feet located at 41 Stock Farm Road, which is in the Old Town Bluffton Historic District and zoned neighborhood conservation, HD. This site is in Stock Farm, and I put that in quotes because it is not within the Stock Farm development plan. So it does not have the same covenants and restrictions that the rest of Stock Farm does. It is behind the Stock Farm development planned area.
The area that Mr. McCracken owned, and it's not inclusive into the HOA.
It is outside of the HOA area.
Yes.
This is a site plan, so you can see that there is the tidal rivers of the May River on your left-hand side here. And then you've got Stock Farm Road at the front. This is the OCRM line with the setback and the reduced setback line.
Just for clarification, OCR line
I'm
stands for?
sorry, I'm gonna stop using your initials in one day.
That's
You're
what
gonna-
I'm-
You're gonna
I-
catch me.
Yes,
The Office of Critical Resource Management
thank you.
is OCRM, and in this case, that resource is the May River.
I know we're acronym driven, but
I
sometimes
am.
it's just good.
The acronym queen over here, sorry guys. So this is where that setback or that buffer line ends, is right here, because the Unified Development Ordinance does have a provision that if more than 40% of your lot is taken up, it can be reduced back to that as long as it is no closer than 25 feet from that critical line when that reduction takes place. So that's where it gets reduced back to. Here are your first floor plans. So you've got the front porch as well as the back porch. There's a small bump out to the back here with a stoop. You've got second floor plans and the roof plans. Here's the front elevation, so you can see that front porch here and the rear porch here with that stoop that I pointed out right here. The right elevation is this side here, and the left elevation is this side here. The carriage house is not included in this application, and it will be potentially brought before you in the future, but it is not to be considered as a part of this application. So this is a 3D rendering that they provided from the front and the rear, so you can see all 4 sides of the structure. Here are some building sections, as well as details which have been provided. The landscape plan, I made it really big on the screen so you can see a lot of the area is in that OCRM buffer which cannot be touched. And then I've zoomed in for you so you can see it a little bit closer. And provided the landscape plan details because Jesse likes to read them very closely. Everybody likes to read them very closely, but I just pick on Jesse.
He knows what all those trees are.
There's some truth to that. And then the canopy coverage calculations have been put in the bottom corner here. I do have one comment on this, so I did make sure that it is legible on your screen. And then they provided pictures of those for those of you who can't read the chart and see exactly what they are. Now you've got a picture book as well, which was wonderful. Thank you, Site Work Design Group.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Here are some more sections and details. I zoomed in on here because this is one of my comments as well. I highlighted in yellow.
I just noticed though, in the application, you have showing the
Because-
proper gutter, but you're not showing it drawn.
Yes, it just deviates.
So
So I did include that section of the building materials here, so it just needs to be clarified on the actual plans, but they do have it listed as half round on here. So I did include that because Bruce, good eye, I caught it as well. And they also note the door material here, it's just not indicated on the door schedule. So the HPC, as you are probably very familiar, has 8 review criteria. They are found in section 318.3 of the Unified Development Ordinance, and they are what you use when you review a certificate of appropriateness. You are authorized to approve the application as submitted by the applicant, approve the application with conditions, or deny the application as submitted by the applicant. Town staff is found with these following items. The application could be approved with conditions. The first is that the structure needs to be relocated to meet that 10-foot minimum side setback. It is just barely, and
Yeah, how far off are we? And it does need,
like probably 6 inches, but it just needs to be shifted in order to make sure that it doesn't.
Is that
So
a
you can
problem?
see that pop up here, and it does have room on the site to be adjusted.
No.
I'm gonna have her come up to the microphone if we're gonna ask.
Thank you. Yes, you're right. I appreciate it. I am incorrect. No. Just keep going.
Okay.
We're gonna go and then we're gonna ask for the applicant.
Sounds good.
I kind of get it.
That's okay.
Just,
The second item is the gutter profile. It is shown as that K profile gutter on the plans. It is listed on the application as that half round, but the application unfortunately doesn't make it into the field. So when they're building it, we need to make sure that detail is just updated on their set of plans. The third item is that the landscape plan calculations for the canopy coverage are off. So the way that the canopy calculation has been covered is the total square footage, this total heated square footage for the house, and not the area under the rooftop. So it's counting double stories. So when they do the math on where that canopy coverage calculation comes from, it includes additional space. So it includes this and this, however, those are stacked on top of each other. So on the site, that's not the rooftops. So it just needs to be updated to do that. There may be an additional tree or 2 that need to be planted in order to meet that requirement, but there is room on the site here where there are not canopy trees, and could see that being something that could be easily met once they update that landscape plan. So they do have a substantial amount back here, so they're likely not off by a ton. I think I did the math, and they maybe even meet it like it is, but I'm not going to be quoted saying that, so I take it back.
but it's just a mathematical,
Yes, so I need the calculations to be updated, and if there needs to be a tree added, 1 more. The next item is that to simplify the roof lines, reduce the number of roof types, specifically on the front elevation, and consider modifying the porch to a shed roof to match the central dormer in the back.
can you
So
tell us, elevations in regards to what you're talking about?
I think the best way to see it is right here. So on the front elevation, you have a double side-facing dormer. You have, roof line, no dormer. The dormers are gables facing forward. There's a hip roof here, and then a shed roof above it on this dormer. On the rear, it just has the shed roof.
So in the front, we're looking at about 5 different roof lines, is that what I counted? Is that Pox?
Depends on how you count a roof line, yes, but there are several different versions of roof that are in here.
Okay.
So you've got, if you're standing front on, you're seeing 5, yes, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've got the side versions 5. Yes, 5-ish. So when we were looking at it there, in order to make it a little bit more in line, if this porch is to be changed to a shed, or the dormer here in the rear changed to hips, something like that, just reduce the number of roof lines there to make it a little less busy.
Some question, yeah, with 5 different roof lines going on, and the UDO is asking for simplified roof lines.
And then the next item kind of goes in line with that. So in order to, again, simplify it, the low country vernacular, to be more consistent, either change the gabled end on the front to not have the bracketing, or apply the bracketing to all elevations which can accept it. So you can see here, these gables have this bracket detail that's up in the roof line, but it's not carried through to the other gabled ends, which would in theory have the same thing. So,
So it's not consistent, so in other words, all gables, if they show it similar to shutters?
Yes, well, it's not the exact same thing.
Somewhat in the
It's
same concept?
in the same concept, carry the
Carry the same
the character
architecture.
around these sides, yes.
Okay.
And then the last one is the tree removal permit is required for all trees that are being taken off the site, which exceed the 14 inches in diameter breast height. There are a couple in the footprint of the building that do require it. And then I have on here as well in gray, because I did not include it in the staff report, but I noticed that the elevations didn't show the door material type. It is easy enough to update. It's just not listed in their door table, which I've lost, which is included in your packet. I don't think I included the door table here in the slide deck. But it is listed on the application again. Application doesn't go to the field, but the plan. So that's all I have. And that could be specified on the building permit as well and still meet the requirement. So that's what I have.
So let's start the session with the commissioners. Session.
I'm sorry.
I said, I think it's pretty straightforward.
Anyone have any ideas or suggestions in regards to the various roof lines? Does anyone have an issue with those lines? I know it's
I'm
somewhat.
fine with them where they are, but I mean, if,
Yeah, I don't have an issue with the roofs. The reason they did the hips, and there's really, to kind of clarify, there's only 3 different types of roofs on the front. There's a gable, a shed, and a hip. The reason they did the hip was so that if it had been a shed roof, it would overhang on the side, and then you get kind of 1 foot sort of hanging out in the middle of nowhere, overhang on those sides. So they hipped it so that it could die into the building itself.
and it also looks like a wraparound too, then.
Yeah, so I'm fine with that. The gable detailing, it's a little bit, because they are showing it in the front gables, doesn't necessarily mean that typically they would do it on all gables. It's a little bit of a different condition, because you can see they have the windows below
Can you
sort
have
of
a picture
band.
of that, please?
Yeah. There you go.
On the front gables, yeah, if you see that top left, on the front gables, they have the windows within the board and batten siding, and then they have a sort of a band, and then the shake, or the shake look-alike, up above that. And so they emphasize or added an accent of the gable detailing, which is the brackets, and that in just those 2. Whereas on the sides, you can see it's a it's a different condition because the band is lower and that whole gable is a shake. So it's just a different kind of condition, so all that
There's really-
doesn't really bother me.
So there's really nothing that we're, I know that you're saying per section, but to simplify, that's kind of an ambiguous, or it's your opinion, so, we don't really have to, if we don't mention it, then we're fine. Because we're not accepting something contrary to the UDO.
Right.
Same with the roof lines. Roof lines in the gable, basically, nothing is being said, so I guess in motion, those don't have to be mentioned if it's not something against the UDO. Is that correct?
Yeah, if you're not approving something that is, or if
If we're
the
approving-
applicant is not, if the application is not in clear violation of the UDO,
Nothing has to be said about
then
it.
you don't have to include it. It's one of those optional, it's a staff recommendation.
I just was, yeah, so it's a staff recommendation, but it's not really anything that has to be,
Correct.
yes, okay. Would the applicant want to step forward?
We could defer to Mr. Atkins here.
And again, when you come to the microphone, please state your name and who you are and what you're doing here.
James Atkins with Court Atkins. As a disclaimer, I did not design this house. I had nothing to do with the project, other than I'm friends with Dylan, and they're traveling in Europe right now, and I happened to mention to him I was going to be here for another project, and if he needed me to talk architectural lease with anybody, I'd be happy to fill in. So with that disclaimer, I think Evan pretty much described the comments there, why the front porch roof is a hip rather than a shed, and it's,
Richardson, is that allowed to have somebody step in as the applicant? I'm just, okay, thank you. I just wanted to.
I have documentation, an email from him saying that would be great if you need.
No, I was just asking to make sure that we're,
No, certainly, I think we've allowed that sort of flexibility
okay,
in the past.
thank you.
Yep.
Just checking.
And, they've used gables and for the main body of the house, which is approved roof form, and then shed dormer and shed rear porch. That's why the rear porch is treated differently as a shed, because it's not dying around the main body of the house. And Evan described the bracket situation. So, and then from there, everything else, he did provide I know the drawing shows kind of a K shape, but he sent me a spec sheet of the background details, so that's what they'll be using for the gutter. And he sent me the wood-clad windows. Those, and definitely, sorry?
The door was all that you were missing on what you were commented on.
Okay, certainly would move the structure 6 inches to the left.
To make it fit.
I can confidently say I can ask him to do that. And we'll run the note. It sounds like we're really close, if not right at it, so we'll just double check the calculations. And
One of my most famous questions is, the service yard looks really small.
It's right here.
So I'm just saying that it looks like it's just allowing for 2 air conditioners and not having exterior storage for this building, or having a garden or a garage. I have a concern, and also HVAC, but all electrical panels and water heaters and all that other mess. I'm just, if you could show where that service yard square footage put it, it's very small.
that I couldn't speak to, other than they have 2 units there, and it appears the
No,
wall
This
is
is
higher than
better.
2 units.
There's a better shot of that service area somewhere. I know, no,
There it is, so it screens the units.
I know, but it's just, I'm looking for a top view, or
It's not a huge house, so I mean, it's 1 unit down, 1 unit up.
I realize that, but then where's the electrical panel and the other stuff going in? I'm just concerned that, yeah, I'm kind of surprised there's no outside storage or something, especially if you got garden equipment and it gets thrown into there, so that's just a comment.
I think we could just add that as an addition to the
Just expanding the service yard
Consider
area.
screening for the meter and electrical.
That's just one of my pet peeves. Okay. Any further discussion? And if not, I believe that somebody would be able to make a motion with the conversation you had.
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve with staff recommendations and the addition of consideration by the applicant to consider additional screening for the electrical meter, wherever that may be. Is that? Okay. Sorry, was that not good? I'm getting a lot of weird looks.
Yeah, that's,
Because you're saying they have to change the roof line.
yeah, because
No.
you're saying, but you are, because you're saying staff
But I thought
recommendations.
we just weren't gonna mention it.
So when you say the staff recommendations include the comments about the roof line
And the gable.
and the gables.
Okay, can I negate that and start over?
You can.
It hasn't been seconded, so you
So
can.
if you specify the numbers of staff recommendations, which you're for, that's.
Okay.
So that recommendation is,
He's still making
he's still making it? I mean, 'cause-
it, yeah.
help me.
So the motion has been withdrawn. Commissioner Goodwin has the ability to make a new motion. And again, the staff recommendations are up there. I believe it's recommendation 4 and 5.
Yes.
That the commission wants to eliminate.
All right, I would like to make a new motion to approve with staff recommendations, with the exception of items 4 and 5, and with the addition of consideration by the applicant to provide additional screening for the electrical meter and accompanying equipment as required.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion on the motion? If not, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? So passed. Thank you.
Perfect, we'll follow up.
All right, so now we're on to, actually,
This is the hardest and most ruling item
have
that
some
you will have
adoption.
before you tonight.
And this is what's amazing to me is we're adopting these dates for 2023. I believe we all had that in our packet and written here, so if you haven't gotten a copy, you know, it looks like it's following pretty much the first Wednesday.
First is going to be
Exactly.
the Historic Preservation Review Committee meeting,
And the
which
next,
will be every Monday at 4 PM, as long as there are agenda items.
so that's our first one.
Correct.
So we need a motion to, no, you skipped ahead and went to Historic
Oh, is it
Preservation
reversed?
Review Committee.
I'm so sorry.
So,
was too
I
small.
guess let's-
I can't read.
So let's go to the first item, which is the adoption of the Historic Preservation Commission meeting dates. As written, and the meeting dates also on there have application submission deadlines. So I think those are the important dates to be, and why we're passing this now. So therefore, I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I make a motion to approve the dates for the HPC meetings in 2023.
And I'm looking for a second.
Second.
And all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Passed for the HPC, which includes application submission deadlines. Next item is HPRC.
Make the motion that we approve the HPRC meetings as stated.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
The HPRC has been passed. Now, just anyone interested in the HPRC, if there hasn't been anything that's presented, I know that recently we haven't had an HPRC, and that makes it kind of nice for my Mondays sometimes, because we meet on Mondays at 4, but the next HPRC meeting was canceled already because there was nothing on the agenda. So even though it states that HPRC is meeting Mondays, sometimes it's not there. So then we're looking, and there's a discussion, and I'm just wondering, and I don't have this, but is there something in our bylaws or however it's stated about how many meetings someone could miss within a year period?
There is about unexcused absences or consecutive absences. There are. Obviously, consideration is taken into account for people who have travel plans or illnesses, but ultimately it is, because y'all are appointed by town council has the ability to remove.
Okay, and I don't know what the number is or how that works.
The number is it's typically 3 consecutive meetings.
Okay. So just be aware. I just thought I'd state that.
Mr. Chairman,
If you'd like, I can get you an accurate, I can tell you what the exact number is, or what the exact requirement is at the next meeting.
Possibly for next meeting or something like that, that would
Yes,
be
sir.
beneficial, just to discuss. I appreciate it. Thank you. So therefore, that's the discussion. I guess I'm looking for, unless there's any further discussion. If not, I'm looking for a motion to what they call adjourn.
So moved.
And second?
Second.
Second, I got 2 seconds. So no discussion, all in favor, aye? Aye. Meeting adjourned.